And the main goal of this program is to establish and enhance composting operations on upstate New York farms to do stuff like help build soil tilth and health, help farmers save some money by producing their own compost, or even to develop new revenue streams through selling compost. Just to say a couple words about ANCA, we're a 501c3 organization. We're based in Saranac Lake. We serve 14 upstate New York counties, and we work in a couple of different areas. Like I mentioned, I direct the local food system program. What my work is really very focused on is helping to connect farmers and food businesses with financing and with technical assistance of various kinds. And what that might look like is connecting you with someone who can help you write a business plan. Or if you're thinking about applying for a grant like one of the USDA grants, we can offer some in-house assistance. I recently helped a farmer in St. Lawrence County write a local food promotion program grant that they got for about $400,000. So lots of services we can offer folks in this realm. We also work in clean energy. So if your farm has any sort of energy needs, I really urge you to contact our colleague Jill Henk. And we also have an entrepreneurial economy wing, which does a whole bunch of small business services, pretty much anything you can think of, from business plan development to digital marketing, anything that can help make your business more successful and help it to thrive. And now I'm going to turn things over to Jen Perry, who is going to talk a little bit more in detail about this project, which is funded by a grant from the Pollution Prevention Institute. So thanks again for being here today. I'm going to stick my contact information in the chat. Please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything I can help you with or help you get some answers.
Super. All right. Thanks, Adam, so much. So again, I am Jennifer Perry, and I am with the Compost for Good program. So we have some slides to show you guys. And after I kind of tee up the grant and introduce a little bit about Compost for Good, we're going to hear from our soil expert, John Culpepper, and then we're going to turn it back to you guys, because we do really want to support the farm community in the North Country from your perspective as much as possible. So with that being said, Compost for Good, that's us. So this particular project is Compost 4 farms, Compost 2 farms. I'll talk about the grant that is allowing us to do this work in a couple of minutes, but Compost for Good is, we don't really know what we are. We have a really hard topic talking about ourselves, but John Culpepper, our co-founder, said we're, oh, Nora Leah,
thank you.
you mute, or John, could you get on and manually mute her, please? John or Katie, I think you guys can do that as host. So John always said we are 3 people who are really passionate about compost. That was kind of our tagline for a long time, and it still is. We live, breathe, eat it. Between the 3 of us, we own compost facilities, we haul food scraps, we farm, we've been composting for decades. This is what we live for. But we decided, okay, maybe we should have a vision and a mission statement. And so this is what we've come up with. But at the core of everything that we do is the concept of the reimagine of waste. And John, our soil guru, is constantly pushing the envelope in terms of what we consider to be organic waste. And he will maybe mention some of that when he talks to you guys later. But that's a really important, that's at the core of what we do, as is the concept of communities and circular economies. So what does Compost for Good do? A little bit of a history. We started in 2012. John Culpepper, who was the Director of Facilities and Sustainability at North Country School Camp Treetops, had been composting there in open piles for a very long time. And he had in his mind that he could build and design a drum composter, a high flow drum composter, for less money than the ones that he was seeing on the market, that he believed would help make their whole entire composting process a lot more efficient and effective. And it turns out he was right. So John got together with a local builder. This is where I came into the play with Anka, was able to find him some funding. He designed this drum composter. It is performing beautifully at the campus. My God, it's been a little less than 10 years, which is mind blowing, but it's a beautiful machine. We were able to get more funding, and there are, we're now 4 drum composters. This is a 20-foot long by 4-foot wide machine that you'll see shortly. That's 4 total grants from NYSERDA to distribute these throughout the North Country. We're more than happy to talk about them. But the most important element is that there is a design document that is publicly available. So, but I'm going to table that because there's a really exciting announcement related to that drum composter coming toward the end of our presentation. So we really provide a broad range of support for the development of community scale composting really around the planet, but we have to kind of focus it somehow. So by grants, we're focused on New York State, and then even more so on the North Country region. We're always trying to find grants, but we do have to meet the demand of our grant. So more about that in a few minutes. But we are focused on community scale composting. So this is a little bit bigger than the backyard composter, but not really the full-on industrial scale composter. And we support all levels of compost development, not just from the drum composter. We have this dry concept of technical assistance, but really what that means is that we're here to meet whomever comes to us. Maybe you're a manufacturer and you want to build equipment. Maybe you're a farmer and you've got these big piles of poo and bedding and you want to do something with it. Maybe you want to start hauling food scraps. Maybe you want to start a composting business. So we meet these folks where they're at, we listen to them, and then we go back, we find grant money, and we have systematically been developing a whole range of tools to be responsive to these needs as they've emerged over time. And then really the needs come from you all. It's what do you guys need? And so we've tried to be responsive to that, which means that we pretty much do a lot of different things. Here's a bulleted list of what we do, but this is not set in stone. It evolves over time. But I would say the most effective thing, 2 of the most effective things that I think that we offer is hand-holding. This is a picture of us in a field in Canton, and just being there for folks who are interested. How, what do you need? How can we help you? We're on the phone, sometimes at 10 o'clock at night, just providing moral support. And then the second most effective thing, I believe, are the peer-to-peer connections. So we always are saying, hey, Hudson Valley Compost, here's Sherry Witten. You guys are talking about the same thing and having the same challenges. So that we make those connections, and there's nothing more powerful than that. This is, again, I'm not one to read bullets because this presentation will be available later and you guys can read, but just to let you know that John Culpepper will be getting into a lot more technical parts of why composting is something for you to consider. But when we're talking about compost to farm, we're talking about really, again, I can't say this strongly enough, it's what do you need? What are your goals? What are your needs? Maybe it's that you've got a bunch of animal mortalities and you don't want to throw them in a truck and drive down the road. Maybe you want to figure out how to better compost those mortalities on site. Maybe you've got heaps of manure in your back pasture that's literally just sitting there, and hey, if I just did a little something with that pile, it could be an incredible source of fertility for my fields, for my cows to graze on. Maybe you, as in this picture, Laura Cook from Cook Farm over in Owl's Head, maybe you say, you know what, we have a farm, but we want to serve our community. We're going to start taking food scraps, and we're going to go collect those food scraps because we want this business to support our farm, and it's kind of in line with our service to our community. So it really, the sky is the limit. Maybe it's that you're buying compost from Vermont. I'm sorry for anybody is on the call from Vermont, but maybe you're importing your compost from Vermont and you're spending a lot of money, and you think, oh, maybe I could do my own composting on site. So the sky's the limit. So the grant that we got, we have several grants that we operate on. This particular grant that we wrote to the Pollution Prevention Institute, and I simply cannot say enough about PPI. As a private composting facility owner, they have incredible resources and a pretty interesting grant that's available too. So that covers 44% of costs if you divert a certain percentage of food scraps per week. happy to talk about that. This is the most simple, basic element of the grant, and this is where you guys come in. So the very first part of our grant is today. We're here. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're not going to spend a year offering something to the farming community in the North Country and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't match with your needs. We have done some preliminary meetings and we have heard animal mortalities. We've heard manure piles and bedding. We've heard that there are farms that want to start a composting business, a food scrap composting business. So we have heard some things, but we want to hear all of it. So I'm going to talk about that process at the end of the presentation. So what we are offering is that we will send, after this presentation, there's going to be a suite of resources that we're going to send your way, hopefully not overwhelming, but stuff that will be helpful. But the plan, the hope for us is that if you're interested, again, it can be anything, almost within reason, that we would, you would have an intake form that you would fill out for us. And that would kind of give us some basic information. And from there, we would develop a composting plan with you. And again, one farm we went to, he knows he's really busy. He knows he had these piles of manure and bedding, and he just wanted to do a little better than what he was already doing. We showed up with some thermometers and an hygrometer, had an hour-long conversation, and that's all he needed. And he was on his way. We also know there are other farms possibly on this call who are over their heads with farming, but they're also starting composting businesses. So our hope from there is that we will work very closely with you to create a plan for you to get from where you are now to where your goals are as it relates to composting. And that's the bucket of technical assistance that we talked about. Super dry phrase, but it really is not dry at all. And you're going to get pretty excited when you see what John Culpepper brings to the table in a few minutes. Some of the tools in our toolkit are case studies, educational videos. We also have business plan templates. We have one-page flyers. We have calculators, recipe calculators. Again, this toolkit is evolving all of the time. But for this grant, we are going to be producing farm-specific case studies, and we are working with AdSet MediaWorks, who is phenomenal. So we will also be producing another educational video. So that's a very high level of what we're doing. I want to throw, I couldn't pick just a few pictures when I was doing this presentation. So I did throw a few more up here just to kind of get you guys jazzed and inspired. This is one farmer. This was quite a few months ago, and I know it does not look this way now, but this is one farmer in the area who is doing something what's called an aerated static pile. And I believe there's been quite a bit of progress from when we went to do a site visit on this picture. But this individual collects food scraps from around the Potsdam area extensively and is going full bore to do composting in the Potsdam area. We're really excited about that. This is what we do. This is the fun part. This is what technical assistance can look like. So this is us over in Lewis County with Delaterra Farm and doing a consultation. This farmer will be, I'm sorry, I have to put a baby up there. This is Katie Culpepper, the third CFG member. This is what a site visit looks as well. Like if you're really lucky, then Rowan comes along on the visit with us. She's growing up nice. This is another site visit that we did in Owl's Head, and there's always children, same place. So same situation. This is a farm who wants to do a little bit better. They're doing some amazing stuff. They've got a pad, as you can see to the right, and some manure. They're adding food scraps to it. So we're helping them work through some specifics. And who doesn't love a picture of a tractor behind a steaming pile of cooking compost? Blue Line Compost, some of you guys might be familiar with them. One of the things that we also do is maybe you're a farm and you don't want to do any of it. You just want to find different places to shop for compost other than maybe one or two places. And so we would connect you with generators of compost in the area if you just are looking for other sources to purchase and move it to your farm. Another picture, again, this is in the background, and one might think, oh, that's just a pile of dirt, but it's actually a pile of gold, of bedding and manure. So we're helping this farmer to figure out what he can do to make it better. These are the true champions. John will be talking about this in a few minutes, but the fungi and microbes really, they're the reason we're here, and they're the magicians in this whole conversation. So this is the last part for me for now, and I'm going to end with this because it's pretty exciting. We, as I said, we administer several grants, and so through the USDA, we have 2 of them. And we were able to write into 2 rounds of USDA funding that because we're trying to build out regional equipment manufacturing. So we were able to work with Mud Lake Stalls, who they're over in DePoyster near Canton, and they'd never done anything like this before. But they make agricultural equipment, and so we selected them, and they have built, it's pretty much done, a drum composter. This is the one that went to the Tupper Lake Wild Center. So it will look pretty much like this. And that drum composter will then be gifted to someone in the North Country. We're super excited about this. I want to add a caveat that getting a composter, it's like adopting a baby or a puppy. It's not like the composter just shows up and you're like, oh, I'm done. This is great. It's a massive thing. The value is between $30,000 and $35,000. But there is a lot of prep work. You need to make sure this is the right fit for you. But the good news is that we're here to walk you through all of those decisions. We have guidance documents, we will do site visits, we have tutorials, videos, an operating manual. We wouldn't just give you the composter and walk away. But as you can imagine, that's probably going to be a pretty competitive process, but this group will definitely receive the RFP once it's done to basically it's like an application. So we'll be sending that out to you, and that should be coming out pretty quickly. So super exciting. So that's my part. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, John Culpepper, who will now wow you guys with what's going on in the dirt that I didn't know about until just recently myself.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you everyone for spending your time with us this morning. Jen, can you hear me okay?
I can. Just tell me when to advance.
All right. My idea, my view on why we compost and add compost to the land has been changing over the years. I've been doing this for, Lord, 50 years or more. And I have really evolved in terms of the value that compost can add to the soil. So I'll go through some of that today. Go ahead, Jen. As many of you know, farm inputs continue to get more costly. And in many cases, the production level on farms are decreasing. That's certainly true if you look at soils and production, crop production worldwide. Go ahead. But what if you could reduce your farm inputs and increase your yields? Would that be something that you might be interested in? Go ahead, Jim. According to lots of research out there, and much of it is coming, some is coming from the United States, other research is coming from other parts of the world. But there are people out there who are demonstrating through scientific plots, through scientific research, that you can reduce or completely eliminate the need for fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and irrigation. So how does that work? Go ahead. And it's about the soil microbiology. For me, for years, I would send in soil samples to Penn State or other places, and I would focus really hard on the nutrient analysis, the maturity analysis, all the other tests that folks like this can run. But it never occurred to me to quantify or quantitatively analyze the biology in that compost. I always just assumed that all compost is fantastic and you add it to the ground and it's all good. But what really we want to do is select for compost that has a wide variety of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and microarthropods. This can, if you add the right biology to if you provide the right land management conditions, then those microorganisms can flourish in the soil, and that will allow you to reduce or eliminate tillage. In fact, you should, if you can, possibly eliminate tillage. That's the single most effective way to it is a very effective way to destroy lots and lots of microbes by tillage. Another thing to keep those microbes in the soil, to keep the biology in the soil, is to always have a living cover on the soil. And then realize that high salt index fertilizers, pesticides and herbicides, tillage, all those things negatively impact soil microflora. Advance, Jim. So I'm pretty excited about acquiring the equipment to actually analyze compost and soil samples. This is one that I did on a fairly typical agricultural soil. And you can see mostly at this magnification, mostly what we're looking at here is sand and silt particles. Go ahead, Jim. And if you go for a higher magnification, if you watch carefully, you can see the bacteria that are active. Those bacteria about 1 micron across. You can also see in this image the formation of micro and macro aggregates just beginning to form. That happens when bacteria emit glues that help stick themselves and other materials to each other. And that also happens when fungi get into the system and begin to also add substances that glue things together. Go ahead, Jim. So here's an image of a high value compost. And if you can think back to what I just showed you, this is going to be a little confusing, but as we go through this, in the background, you see lots and lots of bacteria. And then we'll pick up, as the image goes along, you begin to see protozoa. Here's one right here in the middle of the slide. That is a testate amoeba. You'll see a lot of amoeba in this image. You'll see fungi in this image. You will see, advance it, there you go, advance it a little bit more, Jen. You'll see a lot more fungi, another testate amoeba there in the middle of the slide. You'll see fungi right there in the middle of the slide. They're beginning to tack things together. That's a macro aggregate forming. That's what you want to see, lots and lots of macro aggregates. And then along come the big guys, the shredders, the micro arthropods. This is a great sign that this compost is healthy and cycling the nutrients within it. So how does this work? The bacteria and the fungi are breaking down the organic material in this compost. But the bacteria and fungi, to some extent, can also break down the soil mineral components. They can actually extract lots of components from the non-living fraction of your soils. So along comes, and so that's great, but if there's nothing to eat those bacteria and fungi, then you don't have much cycling, nutrient cycling going on. So along come protozoa and nematodes and microarthropods, and they began consuming all these bacteria and fungi. That's when That's when a lot of all of the nitrate, for example, that is contained in these organisms, that all of those nutrients are then released to the soil, right at the soil root, and the plant root, and therefore the plant can take that up and run with it. Next. So we can actually tweak the biology in our soil to promote the growth of different plants. Most of the agricultural soils that we see out there, they have a low fungal to bacterial ratio. And mostly what's going on there is nitrate cycling. And this really promotes the lower successional plants, the plants that put down roots really quickly, that put seeds out really quickly, that really invest a little bit, not very much energy into their roots and their stems. They invest a lot of their energy into their reproductive parts. So they produce millions and millions of seeds. We call these weeds. If we increase the fungal to bacterial ratio, we increase the ammonium cycling that happens in the soil. This promotes later successional plants like row crops, perennials, good pasture grasses, and things like this. If you really increase that fungal to bacterial ratio, or rather, if you look at the most productive soils in the world, the most productive ecosystems in the world, they are the old growth forest and high mountain meadows. This is where you have the most biomass per square meter of land. If you look at what's going on there, what you'll find is a fungal to bacterial ratios that can be up to 500,000 fungi to one bacteria. Those are in late end successional systems. The addition of different compost or compost extracts will yield just different results in the soil. And by compost extracts, some of you know this well, but if you take compost and you add water to it and aerate it, then you can extract just the liquids from that, and then you can spray that liquid gently and carefully through traditional agricultural spray booms, and you can add that biology to the soil. You can also add that biology to the upper portions of the plant, which increase disease resistance, insect attacks, and so forth. Next, please. But be aware, there are lots of different compost on the market. They range anywhere from low value, low enough to actually damage certain kinds of plants, if it's particularly if it's immature compost. A lot of immature compost, if it hasn't gone through the right process, will have phytotoxic compounds in there, all the way up to extremely high value compost that have that's biologically complete, that have trillions and trillions of protozoa, bacteria, fungi, microarthropods, you name it. So again, typical compost tests, while valuable, only tell part of the story. The question is, what's going on with the biology? And there are now emerging a number of labs whereby you can have your compost tested either through a shadowing compound microscope or through a DNA analysis, or you can do it yourself. The images that I just showed you came from a microscope, a setup that I've got that's not very expensive, that ties right to my laptop, and it's really easy to use. Next, please. Other benefits of increasing or optimizing that soil biology. There are numerous. If you can increase soil depth, those of you who are farmers, you know the kinds of benefits you get from that. You can increase your cation exchange capacity, both the nutrient retention and the number of exchange sites that are in the soil. You can decrease sediment and nutrient runoff. You can increase the rate of water sifting through the soil. So after a big rain event, your soil can take a lot more water because it has more depth, it has more pore spaces. You can increase the soil holding capacity, or sorry, the water holding capacity, therefore reducing, or in some cases eliminating, the amount of irrigation that you put on your soil. And the right kind of biology can very, very significantly sequester carbon, not for, well, certainly for 6 months to a year, but some of that carbon, if you are managing the land correctly, some of that carbon is in a form that is able to persist in the soil for a couple of hundred years. So this is a major area of research right now, looking at the ability for soils to reduce carbon out of the atmosphere. And there are some claims out on the market right now that are absolutely unbelievable in terms of the benefits that increasing our soil, managing our soils differently can really pull lots and lots of carbon out of the atmosphere. Next, please. So a couple of takeaways. According to the USDA, 1 gram of compost contains about 1 billion microbes. When I set the slides that you saw, the dilution rate typically is 1 in 5 parts or 1 in 10 parts. I take a single droplet of that and I put it on the microscope and really biologically complete compost. You can see thousands, or at least many hundreds of bacteria, for example, in a single microscope view. On a microscope slide, on a compound microscope, you have dozens and dozens and dozens of these views. So it's really quite remarkable how much you can increase the numbers of fungi, bacteria, and so forth in your soils. Establishing the right kind of biology in your soil will cycle the nutrients that are currently in your soil but unavailable to your plants. So there have been many farmers who have established the right biology in their soil, and they have very significantly reduced the amount of fertilizer that they put down, the amount of pesticides, the amount of fertilizer or herbicides. And if you're farming, 10,000 hectares, then the savings can be very, very significant. Next, please. Or is that it? Oh, an example of where you can get biology testing on your soil. And this is just one example. I'm not necessarily promoting them, but Soil Food Web Institute is one. CFG, that's us, Compost for Good. We will, on a limited basis, be able to do that in the future, to be able to give you a quantitative and more qualitative analysis of your soil, of your compost, and the way your soil is changing as a result of how you're managing land. So my apologies for my low energy. I just got out of surgery and I'm on lots of painkillers, and so I can't remember anything that I just said. Hopefully it makes sense. More than happy to take some questions from you.
Awesome. He's not kidding, John. John is the toughest human being I know. we knew that we wouldn't be able to keep him down too long. So I just have to, I'm going to say this, that I am so blessed to have come into the Culpeppers' lives. John is an incredible wealth of endless and boundless enthusiasm, is constantly pushing the envelope. John, I don't know if you want to take just a really quick 30 seconds to talk about the expansion of the concept of organics outside of food scraps and manure, and then we're going to turn it around for some questions from the crew. And just before you do that, just really quickly, if folks want to start, there's a pretty good chunk of us, so if you have questions you want to throw into the chat, I will try and switch over to that, and maybe Katie, you can help me. But if folks also want to use the hand raising feature, you go to, well, I can explain that when we open it up for Q&A, but sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, anything that was once alive, pretty much anything that was once alive can be run through a high temperature composting regimen and produce the kind of compost that you're looking for. We're doing lots of experimentation with diverted human urine. In fact, in day 3 of the International Urine Diversion Conference that I'm missing right now. And there are people all over the world who are trying to figure out how to extract nutrients from human urine. And there are billions and billions of dollars worth of nutrients that are being flushed down the toilet, fouling water systems downstream. We've developed a very, very simple, safe, and effective way to process diverted human urine and turn it into really high value compost based on Penn State tests, based on DNA analysis, based on our own microscope analysis. So there are just a wealth of nutrients out there that are waiting to increase the productivity of your farm. I'm not promoting the application of diverted human urine. That has to go through a permitting process by the state, as you might imagine, but the day is coming, I'm quite sure, where you will see tanker trucks or other ways of conveying large amounts of diverted human urine to composting processing facilities.
Yeah, excellent. And if folks haven't heard, natural organic reduction is another thing that's on the table. I'm sorry, John, did it pass in New York State or not? It's
passed both houses of Congress, waiting for our governor's signature. Likely she won't get to it until after the election. But also,
and that's the composting of human bodies. Sorry, just to natural organic reduction is the friendly way of saying it, but human body composting, human remains.
And if she passes that legislation, we'll be the 5th state in the country where composting human remains is legal. Right behind that, I think probably could be done already. Just know that there are approximately, by my calculations, about 14 billion pounds of biomass in the form of just dogs and cats just in the United States. So I suspect that in time we'll see really respectful pet processing facilities come online, whereby you can have your beloved pet turned into something that will benefit your rhododendron or your blueberries or whatever.
Awesome. Thank you. So John, you have to hop off at 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Before 1. So we do have some time. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I will put up this last slide at the end because it will explain how to reach out to us. We did say, well, yeah, I'll talk about the t-shirt later. So I'm going to try and manage the chat. Katie's out there as well. We're going to open it up for Q&A for a few minutes, and then we're going to switch over and get into the feedback portion of things. So if you have a question, if you want to hit the raise your hand feature, if you want to type something into the chat, if you want to just wave at us, unmute and talk, just remember to unmute yourself if you are trying to say things to us.
This group is small enough that if you want to just unmute and ask a question, I think that would be fine. All right, while you're coming up with your questions, I'll leave you with another fact. How many times do you urinate in a day? I know for myself, I urinate a lot, and every single time I urinate, I collect that urine and I process it through a high temperature composting regimen. By my estimate, every single time I pee, I can use the nutrients in that urine to develop about 4 billion beneficial soil microbes.
That's too
Fun
much
fact.
information. We've got a couple of hands raised. John Powers, you have a hand raised?
Yeah, John, good to see you again. I know it's been a while.
Hi, John.
So the project is still slow going, but I do have a question related to the things we were discussing before. So you were coming out with a easier to assemble in-vessel composter design. What's the status of that? Plans available, et cetera? I know it's been a long time, and I'm all talk, no action, but I'm still in the process of figuring it all out. So
Thanks for that question, John. That design in schematic form is about 90% done. We're waiting. We just signed the contract, I think, on the second USDA grant that we acquired, and that will allow us to complete that the design work. And my great hope is that that design will be in the hands of the manufacturer for the next composter that we're going to build with USDA money. So the idea is to design something that's even simpler and easier to build than the one that is on our website.
okay, excellent, thanks.
Thanks for that question, John. It looks like we had another hand raised. Elizabeth, was that you? Do you still have a question?
Elizabeth, you are on mute, it looks like.
Thanks. Thank you. I'm really, really interested in this topic, and I'm really like to see it going right to the edge of what's possible. I have two areas of concern. One is microplastics and persistent chemicals, and I just wonder if you would talk about that. And in addition, sort of that same vein, I have heard a presentation from a UVM researcher about the prevalence of pharmaceuticals coming through human urine. So it's not pharmaceuticals from being flushed down the toilet, it's actually coming through our bodies. So both antibiotics, but in particular, her research was about birth control. And in particular, actually in places where there, she was sampling the water out in Lake Champlain near Burlington, and then she realized there could be a correlation with college age women who are taking birth control every month, and it's being processed, and it's not, the water treatment facilities are not, they're not set up to either monitor or manage that. So that's again kind of at the edge of this conversation, I know, but I'm interested in that, in microplastics and also the persistent chemicals like the PFAS and the good intentions of using solid waste that goes badly.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Elizabeth, the concerns and the questions. I'm not an expert in this area, but I sat through a long conversation yesterday about persistent chemicals, the PFAS, PFOS. My understanding is that the majority of those are coming from industrial processes that feed into the waste stream, while those chemicals are ubiquitous and they are now in us and cycling from us to the rest of the biosystems that we interact with, that we're not producing those PFAS, we're simply passing on those that are persistent in the environment. And so to tackle that, and this is just beginning to be done, is to reduce those forever chemicals where they're produced. That's number one. And then number two, at least the conversation I was involved in yesterday, there still will be out there, but as they cycle through over time, they will find themselves lower and lower in the soil profile. That doesn't mean that they go away. That doesn't mean that they're not still a problem. It doesn't mean that wastewater treatment plants can't be set up to eliminate those forever chemicals. But so that's where we are there. The microplastics I'm less familiar with, but I can tell you that most of the pharmaceuticals that have been looked at, and by the way, traditional conventional wastewater treatment plants do not treat for pharmaceuticals, as you just mentioned. I ran one at $1 million wastewater treatment plant at North Country School, and there's no process for treating for pharmaceuticals. But in a high temperature system, they break down fairly effectively. At least the pharmaceuticals that have been looked at thus far. And there's a lot of them there's a lot out there, so there's a lot of research to be done. But those pharmaceuticals that have been looked at so far begin to break down into simpler compounds, less damaging compounds at about 120 degrees. The Fahrenheit, the urine composting systems that we're working with, in fact, I've got one going right now. It's up to about 145 degrees and can get up to about 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and can maintain that temperature for days and days and days. So human pathogens, the pharmaceuticals that have been looked at to date seem to be taken care of. Their birth control products, I don't know anything about, so I have to. So I can't speak to that, but that's what I know about those.
Thanks. I'll be glad to share some links to the research and the researchers who I'm aware of.
Yeah, and you're spot on, Elizabeth. This is such a hot topic. I operate in the Clinton County area, and there's a proposal on the books to ban. And to be clear, when they say solid waste, typically we were talking about through the wastewater treatment plant, so like fecal matter. There's a proposal on the books there to ban it being spread anywhere in Clinton County. So this is really hot and heavy. So excellent question. I know there's others. There's Katie, I'm going to read one from the chat, and I know that there's a hand raised there because I feel like this is one for John, and who's going to be transitioning to a webinar for a grant that we hopefully will get to even do more stuff. So this is from Tara. Have there been any post-synthetic fertilizer application tests as to chemical reduction in the soil once proper biological rich compost has been applied?
Great question. And yes, under the right biological environmental conditions, apparently the right mix of biology can detoxify, that is to say, break down many of the toxins in the soil. There are some that persist for a very, very long time. Most of those are no longer being applied, but they're still out there with us. But the fact is, we live in a world where we've got lots and lots of these compounds in the ground. The trick is, in my opinion, stop putting them there to begin with. Improve the biology in the soil so that many of those will be broken down. We're still going to have soil to raise the billions and trillions of pounds of food that we eat. So in my mind, so I'll stop there.
And this is the magic of compost. The more, at least I learn, I've been market gardening for almost 30 years, and I'm like, I know how to compost. I know nothing. Like if anybody watches the Game of Thrones, like, you know nothing, Jon Snow. I know nothing. There's so much to know and learn, but the magic of compost as a filter of sorts is astounding. And I want to point out one key element, because this is really getting into the nitty-gritty of composting. is the temperatures that we keep talking about. There's a sweet spot of temperature that happens just by the microbes, just by making them happy and giving them what they need. And that's recipe development, feedstock sourcing, which that's what we're here to help you figure out. And there's kind of a range of temperatures. You can be too low, too high. And in that sweet spot of temperatures is when this purification, so to speak, happens. And it's the evidence of what can happen is increasing and pretty staggering. So there's a hand up. There's a couple of questions in the chat too, Katie, but if we want to go, is Ariana? I don't know if there's anybody else besides, that's the one I'm seeing.
Hello.
Hi, Ariana.
I'm at a farm in Essex, and we were having 2 reoccurring problems with our compost. One of them is managing moisture content. We're kind of doing like a pretty low tech. It's just a pile on the ground. It's largely uncovered. It's, mostly bedding, mucking out the barns, and like a little bit of food scraps. And for a long time, yeah, it was uncovered, and we would find that it would be too wet. And then it had like some external landscape fabric. So over the summer, we covered one of our piles, but then it was like kind of like dry and dehydrated and like too. That didn't seem to do it either. So I wonder if there's any low-tech solutions for managing moisture.
Yeah, Ariana, it's a really good question, and I won't take too much time because every composting system is different, and the solution that you might employ might be different. But I will say this: if your compost gets above about 55% moisture content, if it gets really saturated, it goes anaerobic, and lots of things happen that you would rather not have happen. So you can, and in fact, people all over the world, billions of pounds, billions of tons of compost or materials are being composted as we speak in open rows. And typically the best approach when something gets covered, if you can keep the water off, that's great. So tarps help, but mixing that material on a regular basis will bring the oxygen back into the material, so that the microbes can get going again. It's another reason why I'm such why I love in-vessel systems. You can control the environmental conditions, and whether it's a ASP system or in-vessel drum, so you don't have that problem. But if you have an open pile and you begin to get too wet, then you have to find some way to mechanically mix that material.
And I will
I'll
say,
just jump.
yeah,
Go ahead,
we're
John.
probably gonna say the same thing because Katie,
No, go
because
ahead.
we're in the same hat, but Katie, go ahead. I'd love to hear from you.
No, go ahead.
Oh, because we're probably gonna say the same thing. So one of the things that Compost for Good has, we have a small donation pool, and we have opted to use a good chunk of that money to send different operators in the North Country to the James McSweeney course. It's called the 131 School for Composting, 131, because that's the kind of the threshold of magic temperature. And it really, that question that you just asked is so spot on. And there are nearly infinite, but also not so challenging factors in terms of your recipe development that can totally impact your moisture content regardless of external conditions. And that is a classic example of how we could help you. Or even if you were to take this course, read his book, you would see very quickly that there are simple changes that you can make and very simple tests that you can conduct to really assess your moisture content without any special equipment. So Katie, feel free to elaborate.
No, yeah, you got it. And Bob also chimed in and said proper carbon to nitrogen ratio. Yeah, having the right recipe can help. And as John said, controlling the environmental conditions. So if you are going to do a tarp and you get dried out, then we almost always encourage people to do their composting close to a water source because you want to be able to add water if you need it. Mixing it can help decrease the water in it, but if you're too dry and you're not close to water, you can stall things out pretty good. So good question. And I think we had one other come through, Daniel. about special considerations for Adirondack soil. John, I think if you're still on, question is, are there any special considerations for the Adirondack soil in general, or is composting so customized to the hyper-local biomes anyways that there are not any general Adirondack considerations? Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The local parent material matters a lot, and that has to be factored in. But the general guidelines around what kind of compost to produce, how to add it, is going to help every soil out there. Adirondack soils, our basement rock is inherently acidic, and so there are a lot of acid soils out there, a lot of thin soils out there, but all of those soils can be improved with the proper biology, and we've seen that over and over and over again.
Spot on.
A mentor of mine in the composting farming world once said, if your soil's too sandy, add compost. If your soil's too clayey, add compost. If your soil's too wet, add compost. If your soil's too dry, add compost. Blah, 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 blah. So yes, no matter where you are, because even in the Adirondacks, our soils vary drastically from little micro regions. So compost, no matter what.
That was for good. John, that brings you to your kickoff point. Do you any parting words of wisdom before you go to Grantland?
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully what I said make sense. Please reach out to us if you feel like we can help. We support all kinds of every kind of composting out there. We are supportive of, and generally speaking, we can help you if you have issues, especially if you're in the community scale realm. That's the realm between the backyard composter and the large commercial industrial composting. Although we do work with backyard composters as well. So thank you very much, and it was a pleasure to be here with you. Bye-bye.
This is not the end of the presentation, by this. We're just saying goodbye to John. Great. So there's another question a little bit further up in the chat, and I think this is the first question, so hopefully I'm not missing anything. Norlia, and I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. Hello, I would like to compost our cuttings in spring and summer when we prune our vines. Would like to know what would be the best way to do it. Could you point to me some resources? Absolutely, and I'm gonna say this, and Katie, I'd love to hear from you too. That one of the concerns I get approached, our compost facility is in Redford, and I frequently get asked at this time of the year, will you take our garden waste? Waste meaning like their vines and crops and things. And the concern with that is that garden debris brings with it pests and diseases and possibly some invasive species and things like that, which all can be handled well through if you are reaching your temperature thresholds in an appropriate composting situation, especially if you've got your recipe dialed in. So as we have been operating for a year, I originally said no thank you because I was worried. I really wanted to make sure we had our consistent temperatures above 131. And now a year in, we're pretty confidently, we have a drum composter, we're pretty consistently above those temperatures, but I still am a little concerned about it. So I'm accepting it, but I'm putting it in a different part of my yard. I will say that chopping should be an element of it, because you want to make it a little dense, but not too dense. Density is one of the main factors of the characteristics of appropriate composting process. And also one of the tools that we have is a recipe calculator. There's a couple of them out there, but we have a couple that we love and we use all the time, that you want to determine what would be appropriate ratios of your carbon, which would be a brown is what they typically called, even though it's a lot more complicated than that. But a brown might be sawdust, it might be wood chips. We use straw, wood pellets are in the mix to the nitrogen, which would be the debris from your garden material. So I would offer that, and that if you aren't able to get those temperatures, I would just be really careful that it's away from where your crops are being grown so that you don't perpetuate any diseases. But Katie, to you, if you want to offer thoughts from your point of view.
Yeah, no, I think that answers that pretty well. One concern, and I don't think that you're looking to head in this direction, but one concern with really viney material in an in-vessel system is that it just kind of wraps around itself, balls up. So if anyone is thinking about a drum composter and that's the material that they have available, then that's something to consider. But I would echo Jen and say understanding the nitrogen to carbon ratio of that material that you're using will help you dial in a recipe. And you can, if it's a consistent material, I think, are you grapevines? If it's consistent every time you're composting, it will be grapevines. You can have that tested to test for the ratio, and then you know exactly, then you can type it into one of these calculators that are really handy and know exactly how much carbon to add. And even in just a pile in your yard, you can make some really beautiful compost with it.
Hi, I'm Nolia from Maples. Yes, it is a vineyard that we have, and it's a huge amount of cuttings that we have during pruning. So and also after the skins that was left after processing of our wine. So we would like to do some composting, and that's why I have no idea what we're going to do about it. But yeah, we actually, for now, we just put it up on a hill and let it kind of like it's away from the vineyard, and it's kind of, we don't know, we don't really kind of like survey it and see what's going on. But I seriously think like over the years we will have more stuff, and then and more, if we grow more vines, and we have more composting to do. So I'm interested in how we can actually do it and then give it back to our vineyard, the soil or the compost at a later date. So I saw that some vineyards in Europe, they burn the whatever cuttings they have, and I don't know whether the ash, they throw it back into the vineyard, that will have more carbon that will release into the air. But I think it's not a good way, but that's why I'm reaching out to you. If you could point me to the best way that I can do this, it will be really great.
So you're a perfect example of a farm who we'd love to work with in the future. If you, I think Jen will, before too long, throw up on the screen again the intake form. You're Norelia, a great example of a place that we'd love to come visit. We'd love to see the space that you have and help you determine the best system for dealing with your organic waste. So let's stay in touch, and we'd certainly love to help you develop a plan to do good things with that waste that you have.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah, and we can see in the chat what's already happening. We've heard from Bob from Little Grass Farm, who composts there, and Jeremiah, a couple of thoughts and recommendations. So that's the peer-to-peer part. Again, it couldn't be more valuable. Some other opportunities, maybe if you're starting composting, there is in New York State, there are 3 thresholds of permitting. One would be exempt, one would be registered, one would be permitted. That's an example where in the past we've had presentations such as this, that conversation came up, and one farmer who had gone through the process was talking to a farmer who was just starting the process. So Jeremiah is saying that's what he's done with his vine material. So that's which was to let them dry and chip, treating them as a brown. Jeremiah, I'm curious, did you have it tested? Like, it is a carbon, or did you, like, what was the basis for that decision for it to be used as a brown?
Just thinking about how pliable it is as a material when it's green, so fresh, and as you let it go to that carbon stage with the nitrogen coming out of it and turning more into that solid carbon material, it was a lot easier to handle. It was a lot easier to turn. We do all our turning by hand, so it was just a lot easier to control. And we do get wood chips, so just seeing what we were getting intake wise as well and how we handled those, it was the best solution that we had.
Nice.
And that's a great example of depending on what you need, right? If you're in need of a carbon source for your composting operation, you have the grape skins from your vineyard, probably pretty high in nitrogen would be my guess. If you were looking to then balance with carbon, but if you also had a ton of wood chips that you had at your disposal, then maybe the vines would be better served as a nitrogen. So not letting them dry out, but that's where there's no one size fits all. It depends on what your resources are, what your expenses are, what your labor looks like, how much interest you have, as Jen said at some point. Are you looking to just find a good source to buy a compost? Are you looking for an easy solution? So lots of different ways to go, and yeah, we can help you customize that.
Yeah, and when I'm gonna, before we say goodbye to each other at 1:29, I'm gonna put the slide back up on how to contact us, but we're gonna email everybody in this who signed up to be here today, and then and folks in general, and we'll include a pretty comprehensive list of resources, and in that will be access to a calculator, a recipe calculator. And the beautiful thing is, because of the work of people like James McSweeney, is a lot of standard feedstocks are, because you're gonna have to enter certain values, that there's some standard numbers out there already. And like Katie said, if something happens, you can't find your feedstock, then you can test it. We started using hay, we were using straw, we had our hay sent away, and it was not what we thought it was. We were really surprised. So with 10:11, this is the best. I want to keep going with Q&A, but I also want to spend a few minutes getting some feedback from you guys. But Pierre, I did see your message from before about reaching out and contacting with you. I don't know if tomorrow will work, but we for sure will find a way to connect with everybody that wants to connect with us. But your most recent question, is there any plans for composting facility visits locally and or mentorship? 100% yes, we do that all the time. And Pierre, but local, where is that? Where are you local? What does that mean for you?
Willsboro, New York.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We do this on a regular basis, and what we do is, especially as the more work we do, we would match. So maybe you're wanting to do an aerated static pile. Maybe you want a drum composter. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you have cow manure. So we would connect you to a match, basically, with similar to what you're doing, and meet you in the field. Absolutely. And who knows? So this actually maybe is a really good mentorship. I'll answer that quickly too. Is that I can't speak highly enough about James McSweeney's course. The next one, unfortunately, isn't until February, but it's great because it's online, and you can take this much of it, or you can take this much of it. He inundates you with resources and connections, and is absolutely a brilliant thinker. He thinks to the macro, to the micro, but on our scale. With Compost for Good, the mentorship question has come up with us in the past, and so maybe this is a great time, unless there's any other hands raised. I don't see anything. It doesn't mean this is the end of questions. It just means we're gonna just shift gears a little bit. So I did set up a poll, because I know everybody loves polls. They're kind of straightforward, like yes or no questions. So and some multiple choice. There's 10 of them. So I'm going to launch that. So if we could take a few minutes to just jot down your answers, and then we're going to open up the rest of the presentation for if there are any other questions. But this is the beginning phase of you giving us feedback in terms of what your needs are. And again, there's going to be other ways to do this in the future, but we're just starting to hear from you. So possibly mentorship is something that we hear. Site visits, we hear that. So we'll give it a few minutes. Can folks see this? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And make sure people check out the chats, because Elizabeth has offered and Natasha different composting course options as well. So
great.
check that out.
Yeah, good. I'm curious to see that. That's fantastic.
And while people are working, I want to just mention too, Jen mentioned the composter that's being built currently. It's an in-vessel composter. One of the caveats for where that goes is that we want it to be an educational site. So we're always looking to bolster our ability to give tours and to show people, not just talk about composting. So that will be coming soon.
So we'll give it, I guess, just because they're 10 questions, they're pretty meaty. We'll give it maybe about 5 minutes. So if anybody needs a bio break too, anything like that. And then we'll come back together around 10:20. Or my computer's around 1:20, sorry. Wrong time zone.
And I just saw that it won't let you submit if you haven't answered all the questions. So even if they don't apply to you, maybe just.
Oh yeah, thanks.
click
I was
other.
going to mention that if you're out there and you are a farm advocate, farm service provider, feel free to just take your best guess. Maybe if you can think of one particular farm, if you can maybe just aggregate answers. But like Katie said, unfortunately, it's all or none. So just if you could take your best guess, that would be helpful. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate that. These are really interesting. This is great. Just a couple more minutes and then we'll come back together. Okay, it looks like it's slowed down. Is there anybody who's still answering questions? You could unmute and say yes, or just raise your hand. But it looks like we got an awesome response rate. So I will do a better analysis of this after the presentation is over. But the one thing that really jumps out at me is the very last question, number 10. I was not expecting this. Are you interested in starting a new or expanding an existing on-farm composting business, e.g. selling compost? I was not expecting that. I was expecting a lot of folks to be interested in like just composting on site and using it on site, or finding compost. So this is really exciting. I will say one of the elements that's of value for us is, and this is just our values, we're always happy to hear other folks' values, but a concept of a decentralized model, which we believe is infinitely more resilient and more supportive of a community scale. So rather than there being, one or two really big whatevers, that we take this ownership of our own fertility, we are able to use resources locally, keep them local. So we would love to see farm compost businesses all over the North Country in a decentralized manner. And the model that we support is a network of interaction and cooperation on that end, where we can support each other. So I'm going to click share results because I'm not sure. Oh, I guess you guys can see it. I'm just going to send them out to you guys later because I do want to spend the last few minutes together hearing from you all. So thank you for that. There will be a more in detail, there's going to be several things coming to you. One of them is an intake form to sign you up to enjoy our services. But the other thing is, again, a list of resources that we'll be sending to you and results and follow-up reporting of this presentation. So just so you know, that is coming your way. So we have 9 minutes. Hopefully that got your juices flowing. So what we'd like to hear from you, if anybody's willing to share, you can do it now, you can do it later by email. It will be part of the intake form as well. But if anybody wants to raise their hand, go into the chat, this big fat question, just opening it up broadly. Based on that, especially that number 10 question, what do you think that you need? Is it more presentations like this? Maybe we do monthly trainings. Is there a discussion group that we can put out for you? Is the site visits? I'm getting emails actually the whole time from folks that are like, yes, we want a site visit. So that's super exciting. Is it access to grant? I'm a grant writer. So we can be talking to you about grant writing and different grants. So if anybody wants to share now, we'd love to hear from you. Public education and food scraps is a resource from Bob Washoe. I love it. Couldn't agree more. Okay, I'm not seeing any responses. So I'm gonna keep saying things that I've heard. I was at one farm in particular in the Beekmantown area, and there were serpentine rows and rows and rows of cow manure that had bedding mixed in with it. And they're like, we don't like what Norlia said before is a very common story to us. Like farmers that we know value compost, we go to their farm, we go to their facility or their site, and there's heaps of organic matter. It's their compost, and they're just like, it's like the ugly stepchild. They're like, we don't know what to do with it. It's just sitting there. We just pile it there and we hope that things happen. And so that's not an uncommon thing for us to hear happen. So this particular farm, what it turns out they could use is a windrow turner, which is a big machine. We actually just purchased one from New Jersey that goes alongside your tractor. It operates in the PTO and it straddles windrows and it mixes. It's like a big rototiller basically. So it can also get a one that infuses water into your pile as it's being turned. So we're really on this concept of community and supporting communities, and especially this one windrow turner that we actually just purchased is this concept of shared equipment in composting land. One piece of equipment, a windrow turner, depending on who you are, you might use it more frequently, less frequently, but it could be something, ours is on wheels, so we could just like hook it to a truck and bring it to your farm. So that could be a shared service. So one of the things we will be looking at as we go through this intake process is what kinds of equipment do you think you need? What do you have that you might be willing to share? Screening equipment. Some composters only screen once a year, but they have a $15,000 piece of equipment to screen with. So maybe there's collective shared screening equipment that is owned by so-and-so, and you know that like, okay, we're gonna do a little tour. We're gonna do a screening tour this week. So those are some examples that of other things that we're gonna be asking from you. Equipment, and what do you have to offer to the composting community? Would you be open to a site tour? All of these things are coming down the pike. Nora, yes, the site visit. Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like we're going to be busy, Katie. We need to get a vehicle going. Great. Any other questions from the crowd? Comments? Katie, anything you want to add?
It always occurs to me, and you were talking about a big pile of organic matter that is common on farms, and it is common on farms that there is a whole lot of input, buying in of material, and ultimately I think what we're all about, what we're working towards is closing those gaps or connecting those things, right? You need material, you need finished compost or fertilizer on your fields. You have this material that's not as useful as it could be, so you're bringing in material from elsewhere. We're trying to connect the dots, whether it's with equipment shares, whether it's education, whatever it is, we're trying to create those networks to make it happen so that we are within our communities able to process our organic resources and put them right back onto our fields to grow food for our communities. We're really passionate about that. So it seems very obvious, but yet it is happening all the time on all farms that you've got organic material and you're buying in organic material. So yes, no shame, but we can help.
We can help. Bob, I see your question. So the answer to that is it depends. Katie operates a 4-foot by 20-foot composter on the little flower farm. I know I'm missing a word because I always do.
Little farmhouse flowers.
That one. We built and operate one that is 5 feet wide by 20 feet long, and then North Country School Camp Treetops one. So by volume, I'm assuming you're talking about cubic yards. That is the $1 million question. I can send you some numbers for because we just went through a year of operation. So I can tell you by pound, which we can correlate to a cubic yard of food scraps, what we put in and how many cubic yards of compost we took out. But the challenge for us is that our composter, most drum composters are half full. That's their optimal sweet spot. So it's, we could volumetrically determine, but a pile will reduce drastically, as you know, Bob, from like, what's it, 2/3, Katie? It's like a pretty significant.
Yeah, they say, 50-60%.
Yeah. So, but I'll send you some numbers, Bob, for sure.
The other thing with in-vessel, the drum composters, is that there's not an exact amount that has to go in. So if you have, there's not a magic number for the throughput. If you have a lot of material, it might stay in the drum for less time because you're rotating it more often to make space. That might mean you need to have a longer secondary decomposition period outside of the drum, or maybe you're putting in less, and so it's spending more time in the drum. It's getting primary and some secondary decomposition, and then you have less time outside of the drum. I'm talking fast because I see our time is limited, so hopefully that makes sense. But it will, as Jen said, drastically vary depending on what you're putting in, how much you're putting in, and how dialed in you've got your recipe.
Yep, perfect. I'm gonna end with another screen share of our contact information, and hopefully, like, if any of you are going, wait, primary decomposition, secondary decomposition, what does that mean? Then that's a sure sign that you need to reach out to us. And just to be, I think it's clear, but this is not a pay for fee, like fee for service. This is a grant supported initiative, so we're not trying to sell you like sales. Like we just want this to happen. So next steps, there's gonna, like I said, gonna be something coming your way. We are offering some thank you gifts for your participation. I use the word survey, but I try not to, because everybody's like, God, not another survey. But again, we really do want your feedback. And as of right now, the list is growing, but your participation in that form might include a t-shirt. So we have these really nice Compost for Good organic cotton t-shirts, which get composted when you're done. We also have a commitment from a local farmer who is making biodiesel from locally available animal byproducts, which if anybody wants to talk about that, there is a grant in the works to start making more biodiesel locally from from slaughterhouses. And the third thing is a gift card to Hub on the Hill. So that's where we're at now. Those are thank you gifts for your participation. That's more coming on that, and it will come with the slides to you guys. So that is all I have. I think we have maybe 22 seconds left. If there's any last minute questions, any last minute comments, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, please email us. We will happily come to your farm. And if, I'm sorry, the one last thing I will say, if you are a farm supporter, we also welcome doing presentations. So I did one at the Farm Bureau, so we'd be more than happy if you're a farm supporter. Please invite us to any time when you are doing your own presentations. But thank you so much for your time. I know we're all busy. An hour and a half in the middle of a day is most appreciated. So thanks.
Thank you.
I'm going to keep this open just so I can process the chat and other things. So if folks want to watch me process the chat, it's pretty exciting. And I'll stop the recording.